You're listening to the Better People Podcast. I'm your host, Tom Warner. With me today is our ongoing guest, Rhonda Ramirez, licensed professional counselor in Central Texas. And today's topic is toxic positivity. So, Rhonda, talk to me about toxic positivity versus just being positive.
Right. Well, I would like to say that any quality or characteristic that you can possess can be too much or too little. So, when you're a rule follower, that's generally, for society pretty good. But when you're staunch at following the rules, you become legalistic. So, that's a too much situation of one quality. And when you're not following any rules, then it becomes chaotic, and society may want you to kind of tone that down. So that's two less of the same characteristic. And so I think that is a similar comparison to positivity and toxic positivity, because we definitely, as humans, don't necessarily do well around negativity. Nobody really likes to hang around people that are super negative or just even a little negative. We like to interact with people who are positive, and that is, that saying, looking on the bright side of things and seeing if the glass is half full or half empty. We want somebody who is encouraging, and who really can see the good maybe in the situation. I think it becomes that idea of toxic positivity is when people are so positive that they really dismiss what you're trying to express or what you're trying to say about the situation or how you feel about the situation. And when, we all need a moment and a space to express our feelings and to say something that could be pretty realistic about any situation, So I think that is kind of the big difference between just being positive and that idea of toxic positivity. Sorry.
Right. Well, before we started, we were kind of talking a little bit about this, and you had said that it's natural to feel you should feel your feelings. If you're upset, it's okay to be upset. You don't have to trick yourself or to do something to I guess shift that away or sometimes bottle it up. It's okay to express, I'm dissatisfied with this.
Yeah. Feelings are not bad. Feelings are just those things that help us identify, hey, this doesn't feel great, or this is super exciting, depending on what end of the spectrum of feelings that you're experiencing. It's okay to be sad about something. It's okay to be upset and even sometimes annoyed. Like, it is annoying when, something happens over and over again and we don't change it. So it's definitely okay to feel your feelings and to even recognize them and say them out loud, even if you're the only one listening. Sometimes it's really good to just identify that, hey, this situation is making me really frustrated. I don't care if anybody's there to listen.
Right.
But, and those positive people in your life may be those ones that are like, yeah, I can see that it's frustrating. So they have identified that they hear you. But also, hey, have you thought about this? And give you maybe a different perspective to look at it, or just, pointing out that, hey, there's something else happening as well. And then those toxic positivity people would be like, oh, but you're going to make it through. And really kind of cut you off from identifying that feeling or even being able to say it. Sometimes those toxic positivity people are like, don't worry about that. We're all going to make it. Well, a broad statement.
Right.
In general, that's probably true. We're all going to, in general,
Right.
we're all going to make it through, sure. But like, can we have a moment to just maybe just say how it's going, or that feeling that we have, and then we can go to, okay, now what do we need to do to work through it, or that kind of thing. I think the toxic positivity really comes in when you're dismissing other people's feelings and dismissing other people's thoughts about whatever the situation is. Because when we're not heard, that is hard. We're all looking to be heard, and especially if it's a hard situation. So I think that's where that toxic part is that when we're dismissing our feelings, we're not addressing them. And again, feelings are great. They're sometimes a little roller coaster sometimes. And they're not always completely true, but we do still need to be honest about the ones that we're having. And just say them.
Right.
So
well, I liked your
ahead.
example of there's a difference between saying, hey, in my case, I work in a sales world. If, hey, the client didn't like this or that. Well, you can say, man, that's terrible. I wish, we need to rethink that. I tell you what, let's look at it from this angle and let's do blank. Right. Oh, and by the way, let's correct what it was they didn't like in the next, round or whatever it may be.
Right.
Because then you can say, you're positive about it. You're also acknowledging, hey, this isn't normal. This isn't what we're supposed to be doing. But I'm not going to dwell on this at this moment. Let's address the initial problem, and then let's work backwards and figure out, a solution to prevent something from happening more frequently.
Right.
And so I can see that versus the mindset of, oh, it'll all work out. I used to know somebody that would say, it'll all come out in the wash. Okay, it will. I agree with you. Long term, it's going to be fine. But right now, we have a problem.
To identify some things. Right.
Yeah.
And I do think a lot of toxic positivity does come in broad strokes like that. Oh, you're fine. Or, oh, don't worry about it. Or sometimes when talking with kids, oh, stop crying. It'll be fine later.
Right.
I think those kind of broad stroke statements can lend itself to be that toxic, sometimes positivity, sometimes not quite positive, but more positivity. They're just like, oh, you'll be fine. It'll be okay. Which again, you're right. In the long run, probably will be fine. But you've exactly pinpointed the issue is that at this moment, there are some things we can address. And that can be in the work world, that can be in your personal relationships, or just even in your own kind of mental going through your day. Like, okay, yes, I will be fine. But what can I do right now that changes the situation, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, I think the easiest way to identify that toxic positivity is those big broad strokes of you'll be fine, because that's really dismissing any of that detail that you might want to work through.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I've worked with people that do consistently have this positive vibe to them. Almost sickeningly sweet. It's kind of like, oh my goodness, do you ever have a bad day? I want to see you on your bad day. Not that I want you to have a bad day, but I want to see how you react when things don't go your way,
Right.
And so,
right.
And there've been a few people I've met that are just genuinely like that. It's hard to have them to have a bad day, even if it is a bad day. Right. But then I see people that are, it's like, because you exactly, and it makes you wonder.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, bud, you're just too happy. Okay, let's wait till
let's
see what's going on. Let's see if you're really real. And like I said, I've met a few real people that I'm like, oh wow, you're just naturally like that, And then I've met people that
I can. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say. Then I've met people that I could tell. Yeah, you're just putting on a face, and you're not going to be like that in a few minutes.
Yeah, I was going to say. I think in my lifetime, I can think of 2, maybe 3 people that are authentically just positive, and they mean it from the deepest part of their heart when they're talking to you, and that's just who they are. And yes, I have met more than my share of people who have tried to be consistently positive when I knew that was not how they were feeling. And that tends to then bottle up stuff. And I have seen a couple, kind of had some really disastrous explosions of emotions because they were being kind of that toxic positivity person in their life and in their work, and weren't ever really even identifying or saying their own feelings or situations. So they weren't even really truly being honest with themselves. And that spread to let me also cover up your other people's emotions and feelings. And so it was hard for anybody to be truly authentic in their presence as well. Because they would use that positivity in a very toxic way and just kind of cover up anything instead of, like you said, kind of addressing the situation and being like, yes, we will be fine, and we will complete this task and do what we need to do. But let's address this situation.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we covered it. No, I'm just kidding. So people don't be that way. Well, and I'll also say, you can, and we don't, this topic was more on the toxic positivity side, but it is possible to be, I mean, I guess, is there such a thing as toxic negativity in that case? And I would say the answer is most likely yes. It's kind of a no-brainer. There is, but I meet people of that side too. That the Eeyore concept of I'm guilty at work. People say, "Hey Thomas, how you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm fantastic," and they're like, "Okay, no, really, how are you doing?" "Okay, well, I'm just tired. I'm not having a great day, or this is going on." And, I don't necessarily want to be known as the guy who always complains either. I want to say, yeah, it's not going great, but I think it'll turn around in a few hours. I try to approach it from that angle, and that way I'm being truthful. I'm saying, yeah, right now I'm bound up with all this, but I think it'll clear up, in a few hours. Of course, then I get into this loop of that's just how my life is, like still waiting for that next turnaround. It'll get better at the end of this week, and then the next week's the same thing over and over.
Right.
Again.
Well, definitely, like I said at the beginning, every characteristic, too much or too little, there's generally something that can be a little bit toxic about either end, know? So yeah, when I think sometimes we have to identify the negative characteristics if we're going to be authentic about things. But yes, I think there are also those people that can't ever see any positivity anywhere, and those people who do have that extreme negative attitude, like I said, people don't really want to be around them too often.
Right.
People just tend to not create friendships with those people, because I don't want to be around someone who tells me that's not going to go like I planned, or because I'm also an art teacher, and who knows, sometimes I just experiment with things, and sometimes it doesn't go like I planned, but it'll be fine.
Right. Well, I was going to say,
will be fine in a way that I learned something,
right.
Not that it will, that I'm dismissing anything. But yeah, man, that didn't work well. But I did learn this, So I think that extreme negativity generally kind of pushes people away.
Well, it does. It pushes away the positive people, but then I've noticed one thing: it attracts other negative people.
Oh yes,
and I've seen that too. And so you end up with this. I don't know how to describe it, like a pit. Like you go to a certain part of the office, and there's this depression, figuratively. Yeah. But you're like, I don't want to go over to that part because they're so negative. I don't even want
to walk through it.
Yeah. And it's because they've attracted that negativity to where they get around. An example might be they complain about a person, or they complain about this. They complain, but they're not making any efforts to address it or fix it, or to go talk to the person that they have a problem with and say, hey, I have a problem, and that is again part of the whole point of the podcast is to not that I'm trying to change subjects, but is to address those situations. I see so many situations go awry because somebody did not communicate effectively or at all, or it was misinterpreted. The easiest way to misinterpret, and we had talked about this before with communication, is email and text. It is so easy to go off the deep end on something that was not at all intended to sound that way. And and it's because, what, did you talk to them? No. Well, that would be another episode, but I do think that there's some timidity or timidness that we need to kind of get through. Sometimes I call it ripping off the Band-Aid. You have to just say, okay, this is going to be uncomfortable. I'm going to say it. Let's talk about it, and then we can address it. And that way it's talked about. Now, I've also been accused of being too direct on certain things too. So,
well, I have, I think I might have even told this before, but I had that situation where I had to say, I am coming to you and I'm going to say some things that are hard to hear, but I think it will help the situation. So, please have some open ears. I'm not trying to be, mean or, upsetting you personally, but I do have some things that are going to be hard to hear.
Yeah.
And yes, it's so much easier if we could be a little bit more direct. But I also had, I just came back from some counseling, and we were talking about, people say they want honesty, but then when you're honest, they're like, why are you so mean?
Yeah.
And so, I think just in general as a society, we got to get better at really being okay with a little bit of honesty. But I mean, also probably another topic for another time, but I also think that we're not very good at being honest with ourselves sometimes. So it's hard to hear honesty from other people.
Well, and I'll tell this story, and then we'll wrap this, and we'll come back. And for those who don't know, we often record a few episodes at a time, and so we have another topic coming up. But somebody had, and I want to say it was an article, or it was talking about living in Soviet Russia and how they interact with each other is different than how we react or interact with each other. In that in Soviet Russia, you don't always know who your friend is. And so you would have to be, and this is a generalization, I'm not saying everyone's like this, but that they are more, like you'll hear what you would define as rude questions and statements made by people to other people, to total strangers, because they want to know, can you handle this brutal honesty? Because I may need your support for something, and I'm referring to back when it was communist Russia, but there was a lot more bluntness in the culture, because it wasn't they were rude, they were trying to be mean to you. It was because, hey, I need to know real quickly, can I count on you if I needed help or whatever? And if you can take it and also dish it back out and not be hurt, it told them more about your character.
Correct.
And so, and again, this is a generalization. If anyone's from Russia listening, correct me. But that is an example. Somebody who had been in that that environment had lived said, yeah, we're just a lot more blunt because we want to know up front, can you handle this? Because I'm going to be up front. You look like a horse when you chew that food, like, well, that's mean. Well, it's just being up front with you. And so it was just an interesting cultural change, especially if then you come to the U.S. and it's new, and I'm sure this is a generational thing with me, but newer hires seem different than my generation, which makes sense. I understand. And I'm sure the people when I came in at 18 or 19 years old who were older than me said, oh my goodness, this generation's so soft.
This generation, yeah.
And so it's just a vicious cycle.
For sure it's a vicious cycle, but I also think it varies generationally, but it also, even in the United States, varies a little regionally.
Yeah.
Because generally I had some friends who spent the majority of their life, in New England, the Northeast, right?
Right.
And they were like, why do you guys talk around things sometimes? Mm-hmm. Like, oh, I don't know what that means because I've always been here. Mm-hmm. But they would definitely identify that sometimes we would talk around things instead of just saying things.
Yeah.
I'm like,
well, and that's true. We do, because we don't want to hurt feelings, or we don't want to. Right. And sometimes I'm like, listen, just say it. That way they know where you stand, and you can see where they stand, and you can, and that way there's none of this animosity. Get another example, and I said I'd do the Russian one, and that was it. But here's one other one. I had to call a vendor years ago in the New York area, Brooklyn or New York, and the guy who answered the phone was just very like, yeah, what do you want? I need to order this part. Okay, yeah, whatever. Okay, great. Got it in. Okay, anything else? I'm like, sir, I'm sorry if I'm offended. And Texan Thomas is like, sir, I do apologize if I've offended you in any way. And he said, what are you talking about? Oh, I said, because you just abrupt. I'm from New York.
Yeah.
This is how we talk to each other. And so he's like, we don't, I'm not mad at all. He said, I'm here to take your order. And I know you're in a hurry. I'm in a hurry and said, that's all it is.
Just getting things done. Yeah.
Just business, man. I'm not the least bit upset. Then he told me a little about his family and it was turned into a good conversation, but he was like, we're just, and again, I'm not saying every New Yorker's like this, but in this particular person, it's just, he said, yeah, we're kind of short with each other. Not that it's because we're so crowded that we don't have time to just talk in detail. So we have to state what we want, say message received, and move on, So it's just, it is interesting how that works out. So the moral of this podcast is don't have toxic positivity. Basically, we need to work towards, processing. It's okay to feel your feelings. It's okay to feel sad, angry, mad, and it's okay. And there are times to feel that way. You don't want it to be extreme to where you live in that. No. But it's good to and it's okay to pivot as needed to say, okay, this is, and it will get better. But don't don't just gloss over. Yeah, don't gloss over.
Right. Don't gloss over, and don't sit in it for way too long. Either or is bad.
Yeah, no, completely understand that. All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and I was gonna say dismiss this. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap us up, and then we'll go from there. All right.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. You're listening to the Better People podcast. This is Tom Warner, and our guest today, Rhonda Ramirez, licensed professional counselor from Central Texas. We've been talking about toxic positivity and how you can kind of combat that and what to look for. As always, thanks for listening. Send us an email at hello@betterpeoplepodcast.com or just visit our website, betterpeoplepodcast.com. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. We have all the socials. Thanks for listening.